the New York Times, Washington Post, Fox News, MSNBC, ABC, NBC, CBS, none of them say anything when Trump talks about obliterating Iran or when he says they're going to send them back to the Stone Age. None of these media outlets or their journalists, who some of them have millions of followers, go and say this is outrageous. These are crimes against humanity. This is pure evil. I didn't see any of that on the front pages of the New York Times. He is threatening to carry out a Holocaust like no other, far greater than what we saw in Gaza. But you know, the only complaint is that this is a foolish war. The price of gasoline is going up. This is Trump is insane. A couple of senators or a few Congress people have said that this is evil or these are war crimes. It's not war crimes. This goes far beyond that. When he says sending a country to the Stone Age and then insulting the Iranian people time after time, that means to destroy the country. He will fail, I have no doubt, but the price will be high. And the Iranians know that they have absolutely no option but to remain steadfast.
Well, that's one other thing I wanted to talk about, because and by the way, what time do you need to leave? Because I understand you're limited on time.
In about 20 minutes.
Okay, so all right, got it. Because this is, to me, is as important as something you said a second ago. President Trump, both this afternoon in front of the White House and then again during his speech here, referred to the situation in Venezuela. And he said, I'd like, if it was up to me, I would take Iran's oil. And he said, like we did in Venezuela, we're making $100 billion. We more than paid for our war over that time. So that's a really good deal. And, to the victor go the spoils is the phrase he used, making it pretty clear to me. And I put myself on the other side. If I'm an Iranian and I heard that, and I'm talking about like Foreign Minister Araghchi or the Pezeshkian or any of these other people, and I'm being told that he wants to negotiate an end to give freedom to the people or whatever, but I hear you say you actually want our oil. It sounds to me like you have no interest in the nuclear program and freedom for the people. You just want to steal our oil. And so to have any deal, it seems to me, would be to submit and hand over your natural resources to another country, meaning I would never under any circumstances do it. How does that strike you?
That is exactly the point. And also, you don't hear the Democrats saying we should get out of Venezuela and we should return their oil to the Venezuelans. We don't see the New York Times screaming about that. Again, the empire, when it comes to stealing and murdering and slaughtering and taking territory and taking assets, they're all the same. There is no difference. When Trump lost the Supreme Court case over tariffs and he had a press conference, he was angry. He said, "You mean to say that I can destroy countries, but I can't impose $1 worth of tariffs?" And he was talking about Cuba. So as he was strangling Cuba and preventing oil from getting there, and all the hospitals were without electricity, and kids were dying, and people were dying in the hospitals, did you see any mainstream media outlet in the United States say that we're slaughtering kids in Cuba? No, because, as I said, the Epstein-controlled media, the Epstein class-controlled media, it's the same Epstein class that controls the government. They control the media. They control the government. There may be different factions. They may have differences with one another, and they have competing interests. But when it comes to empire, they have no sympathy. No one in Venezuela, when they started bombing those boats, or when they went inside the country and slaughtered 100 people and took the president and his wife hostage, no one in the United States, in the mainstream media, in the legacy media, the think tank, said we are the evil ones. And only those who opposed the war were saying, yes, well, Maduro is evil, but we shouldn't do this. No, they are the aggressors. They are the destroyers. Whether it's Cuba, whether it's Venezuela, whether it's Syria, where they carried out 15 years of dirty war and helped ISIS and Al-Qaeda to destroy the country simply because that's what the Israeli regime wanted, or whether it's the war with Iran now, this is all a war of plunder and empire. At least they should have the decency to say that, look, we don't care about human rights. The New York Times, the Guardian, the Independent, all of those fake supporters of human rights, those leftists or those on the right, whatever, they should at least have the decency to say that, look, we are 19th century, 18th century colonialists. We're out to take everything that you have. We will slaughter you like we've done in the past, and that's how it's going to be. But to say that they're doing it to free the people of Iran or Cuba or anyone else, it's just adding insult to injury. But the thing is that in the case of Iran, it's not going to work. It's going to bring about a global economic collapse.
Well, that's actually what I wanted to ask you about next, because there's from all that you've told me here, I mean, it would be irrational and illogical for the Iran to make any kind of negotiation at all, or to give up control of the Strait of Hormuz. That would seem to be irrational. Therefore, I think we can logically conclude that they're not going to do either of those two things. And at 8 p.m. tomorrow night, Washington, D.C. time, apparently Trump is going to start making good on his attack on some of these energy infrastructures, or the water desalination plants, or the bridges, other infrastructure inside of Iran. He seems to be eager to do that. If he starts to do that, what can the world imagine that the Iranian government is going to do next?
Iran will, because the Israeli regime is a part of this war, Iran will destroy whatever infrastructure in Israel that it can in retaliation. But what is more devastating to Trump is that his proxies in the Persian Gulf, Kuwait, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, the Emirates, and Bahrain, all of their vital infrastructure will be destroyed. Their oil installations will be destroyed. Their gas installation, their desalination plants, everyone will have to leave. These regimes will collapse. They will not survive. Iran will survive. It's a big country. And we've already seen how Iran can resist, and how resilient the people of Iran are. We will survive, but these regimes will not. And that will cause a permanent crisis, energy crisis. There will be no hope for it to be eased. And the tankers that are in the Persian Gulf, they'll all be destroyed. They'll sink them to the bottom of the Persian Gulf. This is a war of survival. The United States leaves Iran no option, and especially since these regimes are all partners in U.S. crimes. They are the ones who are giving the U.S. the ability to use their airspace. They're using their territory. They're using their coast, their access to the Persian Gulf to strike Iran. All of the strikes against Iran, even when the helicopters came in and the C-130s came into Iran, they came from their airspace. Without the airspace of Jordan, Saudi Arabia, and these oil and gas-rich regimes in the Persian Gulf, the Americans wouldn't be able to fight a war against Iran. So Iran is saying that, well, you're a part of this war. You can't pretend to be neutral. You have blood on your hands. Now they're going to destroy our country through your territory, through your infrastructure. So we're going to do the same to you. We'll retaliate. And then we're going to have a crisis like no other before.
Are there any talks? So I would imagine, again, putting myself in everybody's position here, if I was Kuwait or Saudi Arabia or Qatar or any of these places, UAE, I would be talking to Tehran and saying, hey, don't do this. Don't take this stuff out on us, especially permanent. And then I would imagine that Iran would be saying, okay, don't need to. Then you better get the United States to back off of what they're going to do. Are there any conversations like that going on?
Yes, exactly. That's exactly what the Iranians have been saying from day one. But these countries, some of them don't have the ability to do so, or they don't want to do so. Remember, all these kings and princes and royal families, they have palaces in the United States. They have palaces across Europe. They have billions of dollars, tens, if not hundreds of billions of dollars of assets in the West. If their regimes collapse, they're gone. They'll leave the people, and then you'll see millions of people driving towards Europe and across the deserts of the Arabian Peninsula, and it's going to get very hot in a few weeks. The Arabian Peninsula will be very hot in a month from now. So this is going to be an extraordinary war. You'll see millions of refugees going to Europe. You're going to see, going through Turkey, and we're going to see the global economy collapse. I mean, what is Trump demanding? Iran to open the Strait of Hormuz, which, by the way, it is open to countries that are not aligned to the United States. But those countries that are cooperating with the United States, their oil is not going through as we speak. But if when that happens, then the Strait of Hormuz is useless. If it's, let's say there's an agreement and if it's open, if there are no tankers, if there is no oil production, if there is no LNG production, then what's the use? So we're going to have a permanent removal of the energy, as well as the fertilizers, as well as the petrochemicals, as well as the market, because these regimes, when they sell their oil, they send their money to the United States. They buy stocks, they buy bonds, they buy U.S. weapons. That market will disappear. So at multiple layers, the American people will suffer the consequences, but the whole world will suffer. Everyone will suffer a horrific.
Well, that was my next question. Is what about both China and Russia and many states in Asia, actually, because they may suffer more than anybody else, and those in Africa too. I've got some friends living there, and they're already feeling some of the effects of this. But if what you describe happens as a result of our initiating an attack to potentially tomorrow night, everybody is going to pay a long-term problem here. Or is there any diplomatic movement by any of these states to try and intervene between Iran and the United States?
Well, the Russians are benefiting enormously because the price of oil is going through the roof, and they're huge exporters. And in the United States, those producers of oil are going to make a killing too. It's the consumers whose lives are going to be destroyed and their business is crushed. And as I said, the money that comes from the Persian Gulf will no longer be going there. The Chinese actually have the biggest reserves in the world right now. They've purchased a lot of oil, and of course they have the Russians. Ever since the Europeans cut off their oil and gas relations with Russia, they've been sending it to China. So China will be hurt a lot less than anyone else. But how can the Chinese or the Russians or others make a difference when Trump is behaving like a madman? I mean, to people here are saying, they're saying, what did he do to these little girls? What do they have on this guy for him to be so crazy and insane in the way in which he speaks, and to say that he's going to send the Iranian people to the Stone Age? What can the Russians do? The only thing that's left to do is for the Iranians to remain steadfast. But I think we're going to have if he carries out with his threat, because the Iranians are not going to back down, we're going to have a crisis which is, I think, beyond anyone's imagination.
And just, I know you're about out of time here. Last question. In the event that does happen, that President Trump doesn't listen to anybody, he does launch some sort of a big attack against the energy infrastructure, and Iran does what you suggested they're going to, and just starts methodically taking down all of this, and it has the impact you had, then there will come one of the things that I feared the most from the beginning here is that faced with a disaster, President Trump may then resort to one more escalation of a nuclear weapon to try and bring Iran to the heel, just like they did with Japan in 1945. What would happen in that case? Because literally Tehran could be vaporized. Is there any concern about that on the Iranian side?
Well, it just shows how sinister the regime in Washington is. It just shows how sinister Zionism is. It just shows the world what the reality of Zionism is. That is what you're talking about, the essence of Zionism, something that no one would even contemplate. No one like you or me would contemplate hurting a child. Yet for Netanyahu, for the Zionists, for Trump, and for the Israeli firsters in the White House and in Washington, massacring and sending people back to the Stone Age is normal. That's why the New York Times doesn't react to any of this language, because that's normal for them. Because they see the rest of the world like the Zionists do, like we're all Amalek. And for me, you probably heard, I have a bounty on my head right now. I'd prefer to die standing than to die on my knees. And those people on the streets, when the United States and Israelis fire missiles at these rallies, I publish footage of them. People can go back a few weeks ago. There was a famous rally where a young woman was talking about why people are steadfast, why they're chanting God is great, and then that's when they fired a missile. And the crowd did exactly what she said. They didn't run. They didn't stampede. And she continued speaking. You would think that this would be the top news story across the Western world. And this young PhD student at the University of Tehran, she would be invited on all the Western media channels. But she was nowhere because the Western media censored her, because they do not want to show all these young Iranian women and young men on the streets unfazed, unwilling to stampede and run away, because then it becomes clear that this woman doesn't need liberating. This woman is the one who can liberate those who are under the spell of the Zionist lobby and the Israeli regime. If you find this tweet, and this clip, and I've tweeted it multiple times 2-3 weeks ago, it's worth having your audience watch it. And it's also definitely worth your audience reading that book, Going to Tehran.
Well, I appreciate that. I appreciate you taking the time to come and talk to us about this. I'm just praying to God that some kind of talking like this, to at least be putting out there the catastrophic consequences of President Trump acting on his threats here, not just to Tehran, but to all of us, but especially those who may be under the bombs of it, just on a humanitarian level. That's our hope, that we're certainly going to continue to be that.
The Iranians are not going to give up, no matter what. And what this is going to cause is a civilizational collapse, in my opinion, across the world. And we're going to see tens, if not hundreds of millions of people on the move. And whether it's in Latin America, and the North America will be collapsing, but still people will be going down those routes that they've been going traditionally. And the same is true from Africa and Asia to Europe, even though Europe will be collapsing. There will be hunger, there will be starvation. What Trump is doing is just beyond belief. And the evilness of what he is saying and the implication of what he's threatening, you would think that they would remove him from power today. And you would think that the legacy media would be outraged and saying, how in the world could you ever talk about sending a nation with thousands of years of heritage? And what is their crime? Their crime is that in 1979, they became independent of the United States. And then their crime is that they support the Palestinian people. They're saying no to genocide. The problem of the Iranian people is they're saying no to genocide. Just like they're saying no to the starvation of the people of Cuba, that's the crime of the Iranian people. The essence of their guilt, what is really lying behind the guilt of the Iranian people, is because they're saying Palestinians are not Amalek. They're human beings. Actually, they're the Semites. That is the real story, and that is why we must be crushed.
Well, we appreciate you coming on and giving your viewpoint on this, and we will pray to God that somehow a way can be found out of this and that nothing happens tomorrow night, and then we can just keep on talking, because that way more people stay alive. But we are always unintimidated and uncompromised to bring the truth, even when it's something like this. Thank you for sharing your viewpoint. We appreciate it.
And thank you for all the heroic work that you do.